What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode. So in today's video, we're gonna be working on the Audi. So I'm gonna begin by doing some of the mechanical problems, and I wanna address those first. So I've got new brakes right here, both front and back. I have new pads along with the pad wear indicators for each one of the brake pads. Now, most German cars have them. It's kind of a good but stupid design, but at the same time, I've got everything that I need to fix the car. So I'm gonna first bring you guys in here and show you what the brakes look like right now. So the previous owner to the car parked it for about, I want to say 2 to 3 months. I forget the exact number, but it was along those lines. And because of that, a decent amount of rust formed on the brakes. Now I'm going to show you guys how disgusting it is. You guys see that? It's really gross. So I'm going to be replacing the pads both up front and in the back. So they've definitely seen better days. I've got new pads and rotors. They're relatively inexpensive, and I want to see how much or how little money I can put into the car, and eventually maybe see how much I can get for it. Hopefully we can become very profitable by the end of this, and maybe make a couple bucks. Maybe it'll be able to be put towards this, or even the Z, or whatever car. I know I want to get this thing up and running, so if I can get some extra money out of that to start paying for this, that'll be awesome. So first things first, we need to jack the car up in the air and remove the little center cap found on the wheel. What that's going to do is it's going to expose each one of the lug nuts for the wheel. Using an impact wrench or a breaker bar, you're going to have to remove each and every one of the lug nuts that are holding the wheel onto the hub. You then can take the wheel off, and then it will expose the brakes and all the mechanical parts that we're going to be replacing while we're doing this procedure. With the wheel removed, we're going to remove the brake pad wear indicator, and we're going to disconnect it from the wiring harness that's attached to the vehicle. We're going to remove this before we start working on the caliper, so that the caliper isn't going to be connected in any other way other than the brake line. Once you have it disconnected, just set it aside, and then we can continue to work on the brakes. There's going to be 2 little dust boots that are found on the back side of the caliper. You're going to want to remove those and set them aside. It's then going to expose a 7mm bolt that we're going to remove. Now this is the slider pin. We're going to first loosen them up to make sure we can loosen them, and then we're going to remove to the front of the caliper, where we're going to remove the little tensioner spring on the front, and then at that point we can move back to the back side of the caliper and remove the slider pin bolts. They're both 7mm bolts. They should be in pretty good condition. Now if your caliper is not sliding properly, it's the slider pins that need to be relubricated. Now we're going to get through all of that once we put everything back together. But once you have them out, you should be able to slide and lift the caliper up and out, and it should keep the rear pad attached to the caliper, and the front pad you should be able to remove and set aside. After that, you can grab your 21mm socket and your ratchet, and then we're going to break the 2 bolts that are holding the brake caliper carrier up to the knuckle. We're going to remove those so that we can remove the brake rotor. Now they might be tight. You might need to use either an impact gun or a breaker bar to get them loose, but once you take those out, you should be able to remove everything. With the bolts removed, the brake caliper carrier and the brake rotor can be removed and set aside. The brakes that were on the Audi have definitely seen better days. You can see by comparing the old brakes to the new ones how much nicer the new ones are. So if we just first go ahead and look at the pads, you can see that we have a decent amount of material on here. These are brand new, and you can see how much meat is on there. Now if you compare that to the old pads, the first thing that you're going to notice is there's a lot less pad material. But also, when the pads get so worn out, that line that you see right there is going to go away. So as soon as you get to that point, that's usually when you start to look into new brakes, and that is where the brake pad will illuminate a light inside the cabin, because this right here is the brake pad wear indicator, and what it does is it actuates and it comes in contact with the rotor when the brake pad is so worn down. Now when that comes in contact with the rotor, it means that, well, basically you need new brakes. So I went ahead and bought new pads and rotors for this car. The new replacement ones were not too expensive, and installing them at home is definitely going to save you a couple bucks. So because I'm doing everything here, I'm not going to have to pay a mechanic to go ahead and do this entire procedure. Replacing your brake pads both front and back will cost you around $500 depending on the parts you buy, along with the complexity of the job or whatever. But just for a ballpark, it's around $500. So doing this right here, all I'm paying for is the cost for the pads and rotors. I'm not paying for labor, which is the biggest part of it. Now, while you guys are doing this procedure, another way that you guys can make the car look a little bit more valuable is while you're doing your brakes, you can paint up the brake caliper bracket along with the brake caliper. Because if you can change that from looking nasty and rusty to a nice looking either black, silver, red, or any other color caliper, What you're basically going to be doing is you're going to make the car look like it's in a lot better condition than it is. Now, on top of that, the caliper and the brake caliper carrier are not going to want to rust anymore because the paint is acting as a barrier from the outside elements. It's completely optional, however, it's a step that you can take now while you have your brakes apart. So next up comes installing everything back on the car. So pretty much everything is just going to be in the reverse order. But before we just start putting everything back together, we're going to install a little bit of anti-seize on the back side of the rotor so that it's not going to be corroded to the hub. So if we need to take the rotor off down the road, it's going to be rather easy. Once you align that up, you're going to start to install your brake caliper bracket back onto the back side of the spindle. You're going to tighten those down with your 21mm wrench. And then following that, we're going to be starting to work with our brake pads. So we're going to try to remove the hard edge that's found on the outside perimeter of each one of the brake pads. Now, if we were to just go ahead and install these pads the way they are, we would get a noise. So I'm going to be using 150 grit sandpaper just to sand down the corners of each one of these so they're not so aggressive. The final result should be a lot softer and you should be able to rub your finger on there without it actually hurting you. The brake pad that has the clip attaches into the piston for the caliper. Make sure you install that on the correct side. The other pad that doesn't have that goes on the outside, so that's the pad that you would see up front. After that, you're going to put some anti-seize on each one of the ears for the pads so that it can slide and it can move nicely and freely on the brake caliper bracket. Now, if you don't do this, it's eventually going to rust and you're eventually going to have to take your brakes apart to service them again because they're seized. You can then go ahead and put the caliper over top of the rotor, and then at this point, all that we need to do left is install the brake caliper slider pins on the actual unit. What I'm going to be using as lubrication is this Permatex silicone grease. So it's made specifically for brakes and it works up to very high temperatures. So this is great and it's not eventually going to cake up on us. You want to put a little bit on the slider pin itself and then you're going to slide the entire slider pin into the caliper. You're going to repeat the same process for both of them, tighten them up, and then after that you're going to put the two little dust boots over top of the two holes for the slider pins. Now last but not least, we're going to install the brake pad wear indicator up to the wiring harness. So we're going to connect it all together and that's going to complete our braking assembly. So that's everything for the back side of it. The last final piece to the puzzle is the little clip that's found on the front. It's going to hold the caliper up to the caliper bracket. Slide that in, push it in place, and then this corner of the vehicle is done. Now with these brakes looking so great, I can't go ahead and install this disgusting wheel back on the car. So instead of leaving this the way it is and just installing it like a normal mechanic would, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this outside and I'm going to show you how I go ahead and clean this to restore it and bring it back to life. This wheel has not come off a car that's been detailed in a matter of like a couple weeks. You can see that the amount of accumulation and brake dust that we have found on this wheel is disgusting. Now, the most difficult and most pain in the butt part of a wheel that hasn't been taken care of is this. So on the back side of the wheel, you can see that this is basically like a disgusting gold kind of color. Now this is not only brake dust on here, but this is stained. So I'm going to show you how to get rid of this and how to make this all look like a new silver wheel all over again. So I'm first going to begin by spraying down the entire wheel with some water so that any light dirt or dust is just going to want to run off. After that, I'm going to follow it up with Meguiar's Ultimate All-Wheel Cleaner. I'm going to spray this on the entire face, and I'm going to let this sit for a good 60 seconds so that the wheel cleaner can break down the dirt and grime, and it's going to come off rather easily. After a minute and a half, you can see that the wheel cleaner has turned all the brake dust and the iron contaminants on the wheel a purple color. So that's great. That means that the wheel cleaner is doing its job. Now, considering this wheel is very dirty, I'm going to agitate both the face along with every part of the front part of the wheel so that all that brake dust and all that grime can come off. Now, if it's a super disgusting wheel and it's really stained just like this wheel, you're going to have to go one step further after this so that you can remove that stainage and you can make the wheel look new again. But after you're done agitating it for the first time, you're going to grab a hose and then rinse it down. Considering this wheel was absolutely disgusting, I hit this with a second coat of this wheel cleaner and then I rinsed it down again. And you can still see that there's still some contaminants on the wheel. Now this here is some stainage and there's not much else that you can do with the wheel cleaner to remove this. So what I'm going to do next is use a magic eraser to remove this stainage and it's going to clean all this up rather nicely. Any parts that are stained, you can just use your magic eraser and scrub all those imperfections out. It's literally going to be removing years and years of neglect in a matter of seconds. So if you do this and you repeat this to every part of the wheel that's super disgusting and stained, you're going to have a finish that looks a heck of a lot better. So it doesn't matter if you've got road grime on there or you have the stains from the brake pads and brake rotors, you can basically remove all of it and then just rinse it down with your hose.
Now you're going to want to do the exact same procedure to the barrel of the wheel. The barrel is going to be a lot worse of condition than the face more often than not because the brake is a lot closer to there than the face of the wheel. So you can use whatever kind of wheel cleaner you want. An acid-based wheel cleaner will also do a good job by cleaning all this stuff up, but no matter what, you have to follow this up with your magic eraser. It's going to do the biggest part of the cleaning during this stage. Now if you're just doing a maintenance clean for a set of wheels you have, you don't need to go ahead and use this magic eraser to get this done. A regular wheel cleaner and a little bit of agitating will go a long ways. But you can see how awesome and amazing this looks by just using some simple products.
After using both of those wheel cleaners and some magic erasers, you guys can see how much better this wheel looks. It doesn't look like it's been neglected. It doesn't look like it's had any years of abuse to it. And well, after putting a little bit of work in, you guys can see it basically looks new.
With this wheel cleaned up and looking amazing, I'm not going to feel bad throwing the wheel on there with the brakes looking so good. So with the wheel now mounted on the hub, it's just a matter of putting each one of the lug nuts back on there and then lowering the car down onto the ground. Now it's very important after you do all that to torque up each one of the lug nuts to the proper manufacturer spec, and then after that you can throw your center cap back on and then you're done.
I've got to say, after doing the front wheels, cleaning them up, and replacing the brake pads and rotors inside the wheel, I've got to say this looks not only a hell of a lot better, but this is also going to be able to stop the car in a much shorter stopping distance. These brake pads are brand new, same with the rotors, and they're going to do this Audi wonders. Now I've got to do the exact same thing to the rear brake pads, the rear brake rotors, and the rear wheels, because I did the same procedure for both front wheels, but I haven't done anything to the rears yet. So there definitely needs to be a little bit of work more done to this car, and this is not where this video is going to be ending. Now, what I kind of think is pretty sweet is the fact that I'm doing videos. What you can do is you can play around with a little bit of editing. So you guys can see that these brakes on this side need to be changed. So in a matter of a couple seconds, we can get our brakes that look like this that need to be replaced and our wheel and tire that is completely filthy. And thanks to editing, what we can do is we can get our wheel and tire that looks like this and convert it to something that looks like this. So even though this actually took easily an hour to do each corner, by the editing process, we can make it look like it literally happens in a matter of seconds. We can make that happen. We can make that change in a matter of a couple seconds. With the brakes on the Audi now done, you can see that the calipers are nice and painted. We've got our rotors that are coated, and as soon as we take this car for a drive, that coating on the rotors is going to wear off where the brake pads come in contact with the rotor, and then the brakes are going to work just like new. So with the mechanical parts on the brakes now replaced and fixed up, you can see that the rotors look amazing. We've got new pads in there, everything is well lubricated, and the brakes on this car are going to be working as they should be. Now I've got a couple other mechanical problems with this vehicle that need to be addressed before I go ahead and detail the car. The detail is a definite must in this thing, and it will be addressed somewhat soon. But there are still a few other mechanical things that I want to fix up. Now, after that's done, we're going to be detailing this thing. We're going to make this Audi look like it's a brand new car again. So you see these headlights? Those are going to be fixed up. We've got a problem with the fog lights on the front. We've got a couple other parts on the body that need to be addressed. But as it stands, this Audi is now fixed, at least braking-wise. The products that I used today in this video were not that extensive. I used regular hand tools for the most part, and I was able to change the brakes in both the front of the vehicle and in the back. Now I did use a couple different brake lubes, but all in all, it was a quite simple procedure, and now that the brakes are done, I can move on to other parts of this Audi. So hopefully by doing this all at home, well, I know for a fact that I saved myself hundreds of dollars because I didn't have to bring this down to a shop for them to do the brakes for me. Now, I bought these brakes for about $100 for the pads and rotors, which is on the cheap side, but they work great and I've got no problems with them. If you guys want to check out any of the products that I used for this video, check the description box. I have links directing you right to Amazon. But otherwise, guys, if you guys want to stay tuned with this Audi, and if you guys also want to see the videos coming out for the Z that I bought, stay tuned, click that subscribe button, and you guys are going to be up to date with all of that stuff. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.